Right. Good evening, everybody. Let's start the class, and we will be completing this my portion of geography within tomorrow. Like, all right. And I do not want to waste much of your ISP preparation time. So let's be very precise and to the topic and to the point. I mean, right. Something that we were discussing in the previous class, and I hope everybody can hear me. Yes, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So there is, okay, one second. Let me,
Right, is this more audible? I think this will be more audible than before. This will be more clear. Yes, no? Or is it like the same? Yes, more clear, no? Fine, then we'll go with this. Right. COVID and its spatial dimensions. I was discussing about this. 2-3 important points is see that heading which is given in your syllabus sheet is epidemic, right? Epidemic ആണ് ഇവിടെ കൊടുത്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. So we need to know why COVID is called as a pandemic and what do you mean by an epidemic. First of all, that's something that we need to, അതൊരു basic ആണ്. Let's just be very clear. You need to know the difference between what is a pandemic and what is an epidemic, right? So pandemic is having a global spread to it. I think I have mentioned to this in that last 10-minute session. Pandemic has a global dimension to it, whereas when we say something as an epidemic, it's got a regional dimension to it. Please take some running notes also. Please take some running notes. Pandemic has got some global dimensions. It's like spread throughout the world. Epidemic എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ it's ഒരു regional constraint ഉണ്ട്. ഇനി മറ്റൊരു ഡിഫറൻസ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ പാൻഡമിക് let me just switch on my video. Yes, now listen to this. Right. Right, listen to this. When I mean something as a pandemic, it has a global dimension to it. When I mean something like an epidemic, it has a very regional character to it. Now, one more thing additionally that you can add to it is pandemic, the virus or that particular microbe which is causing the pandemic, it will undergo mutations. It will undergo mutations. Epidemic na parayumbo, it need not necessarily undergo mutation. It need not necessarily undergo mutation. So example, let's analyze this statement that I made right now with an example. Suppose let's say that I am talking about malaria. Okay, malaria is an epidemic. Seasonal flu or seasonal flu, and it comes with the season. Suppose let's say that there is some rainy season. During that point of time, there will be a lot of typhoid cases, malaria cases, dengue cases, and so on. So it's dependent on the population of the Aedes aegypti mosquito with respect to your dengue, and Anopheles mosquito with respect to malaria. So it's about the population of a vector. What is a vector? Vector nu parayumbo the carrier of that particular disease, alle? So here it depends on geography of a place. Is it going to be a rainy place? Is it going to be, now mostly the states of Kerala, Karnataka, where you are having a very humid tropical kind of a climate, equatorial regions, these areas preferably will have more of mosquito based diseases. Breeding of mosquitoes will be high, therefore the diseases based out of mosquito will also be high. Essentially, what am I telling here? Epidemic is based on a seasonal character of a particular disease. It is based on a seasonal character of a particular disease. And this, it's not like malaria virus, that malaria, it's not going to be like repeating or changing its character again and again. It's not going to mutate. It's not going to mutate. Whereas when I'm talking about COVID, first of all, it was like alpha, then came beta, and then we had delta, and now we are ending up with Omicron. So there is a mutation that's associated with it. Two main character which differentiates between pandemic and epidemic is with regard to the region of spread. Secondly, with regard to mutation. All right. Let's take down some notes here. Pandemic and epidemic. Pandemic, difference between pandemic and epidemic. The word pandemic, now you can write it in two columns, like pandemic, epidemics. I'm going to divide so that you can write it if you want. I will be telling it like this, pandemic and epidemic. All right. So take down the points. Pandemic, first of all. The word pandemic is derived from the Greek word pan, meaning all, demos, meaning people. So it's going to affect all of the people, global spread on. Whereas when we talk about endemic, epidemic or an endemic disease or an epidemic disease, or an epidemic disease. This is derived from the word endemic, meaning en refers to within the population, and demos meaning people, n meaning within, and demos meaning population. So that's how it happens within the population. In other words, the second point, in other words, pandemic refers to global spread of a disease. Epidemic refers to a regional spread of a disease or spreading of the disease within a country. A regional spread of the disease or spreading of a disease within a national border, or spreading of the disease within a country. Next point. A disease or a pandemic, under pandemic, write this: a disease or a condition is not a pandemic merely because it kills or infects many people. A disease or a condition is not a pandemic merely because it kills or infects many people. Continue. It must also be infectious and spread uncontrollably beyond the geographical confines of the original infected area, beyond the geographical confines of the original infected area. Suppose, for example, you can also take down an example here. What is the original infected area with respect to COVID-19? It was Wuhan, right? Wuhan was the first epicenter of this disease. പക്ഷേ നമ്മുടെ that Wuhan region of China, അതിനെ exceed ചെയ്തിട്ട് it exceeded that geographical confine. This COVID spread beyond the geographical confine, right? So that's what this definition means. Now read this from this perspective, that it spreads over a large area beyond the confines of that original infected area. So here I'm referring to example Wuhan outbreak of COVID. Wuhan outbreak of COVID spread to the entire global population. Right side, on your epidemic side, on your next side, write this: an infection that starts as an epidemic will eventually either die out, either die out or reach the endemic state or reach the endemic state depending on factors like mode of transmission and virulence of the disease. A pandemic, next difference. A pandemic depends on new strains of the virus that gets altered because of mutation, because of gene mutation. An epidemic in this side, an epidemic is caused because of spread of infection, which is dependent on some common factors, like geography of a region, climatic conditions, etc. So maybe in the bracket you can write, example, malaria gets spread easily in equatorial regions. So it depends on the geography of that place, it depends on the climate of the place. So an endemic disease or an epidemic disease, it actually depends upon the geography and the climate of a particular place. Okay, so that is a quick difference between pandemic and epidemic. Now, let's talk about what we were discussing previously, that is about COVID and its spatial dimensions. And I remember telling 2-3 points with respect to bubonic plague, Spanish flu, and so on. Like that, India is also affected by COVID this time. Right. Now, I mentioned to you a particular thing that the spread of the disease takes place in the form of waves. That's another character with regard to pandemic. It takes place in the form of waves. First of all, a set of people will be affected, then it will spread to the next circle of people. So it takes place in the form of waves. So that is another character with regard to spread of pandemic. Another thing is with respect to the spread of pandemic with respect to different states take down certain points. So maybe in the heading, you can write it as maybe in the bracket, in the heading part, you can write it as RBI document, so that you will know that it is quite important, right? So point number 1, the impact of COVID-19 has been asymmetric over the states. What is asymmetric? Get the spelling correctly. Asymmetric is this. What is asymmetric? Asymmetric means it is different in different places. Okay, so the first thing is the impact of COVID-19 is asymmetric across the states in terms of spread and mortality rate, in terms of its spread and mortality rate. Essentially, the demographic transition, this is where geography comes, the demographic transition of a particular place decides the epidemiological transition of COVID. The demographical transition of a particular state decides the epidemiological transition with respect to COVID. India is in the third stage. We have discussed this before with respect to the demographic transition theory. We are in this late expanding stage. We are in this late expanding stage. Late expanding stage. Now understand something. Depending on which stage a particular country is at present, the nature of diseases which that particular country has to undergo will also differ. Suppose let's say that a country is in the first stage. So there will be very high mortality rate and very high death rate. Now, very high birth rate and very high death rate. Now, in that kind of a country, in that kind of a country, which is undergoing or which is there in the very first stage of demographic transition theory, I can expect more of communicable diseases. I can expect more of communicable diseases. All right. And then slowly we'll be having a transition from communicable diseases towards what is called as non-communicable diseases. And right now we are facing another transition that is towards emerging antimicrobial resistance based diseases. Antimicrobial resistance based diseases, emerging superbugs, otherwise known as AMR, antimicrobial resistance based diseases. So in fact, we are continuing with your notes. India is in the late expanding stage of demographic transition. Full stop. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Himachal Pradesh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. These are some of the states which have a significantly higher proportion of 60 plus age population people, 60 plus age population people, as most of the youth from these states, migrate towards city centers in search of economic or employment opportunities. Now understand something. These are already very well developed states. So what happens is they have pockets like Bangalore, Chennai, you have pockets like Bombay. So the skilled youth of these states, very skilled youth of these states, they will be concentrated only in the city centers. Whereas if you take, I explain this from the perspective of two places. If you take the example of many parts of Kerala, you can actually see a lot of old age people. You can see a lot of 60 plus people. Now, why? Probably because the youth of these states, the youth of the state might have either moved to foreign nations, like maybe to Saudi, to the West Asian republics, or maybe to United States. So the point is, for education, for employment, there is a transition of the youth, or there is a shift of the youth from Kerala to West Asian countries or to USA or to Australia. Similarly, Andhra Pradesh is another example. Most of the youth, like that's their ambition itself. Like move to United States, earn money. This is their ambition. So most of the youth of Andhra Pradesh, they would immediately clear. Kerala is well known with respect to clearing NEET exams. Andhra Pradesh is very well known with respect to clearing IIT JEE. So what they do is they immediately crack the top exams. They move to United States, become software engineers, settled. Now, what happens to the people in these states? There will be mostly 60 plus age of population, but they will get income from abroad. So two things are getting, if you from geography perspective, if you analyze the demographic transition with respect to these states, two things you can see very evidently. Maybe take some running notes also. 60 plus age population will be very high. The second thing is GSTP. You don't call it as GDP. This is the gross democratic, not democratic, GDP. What is it? Is GDP domestic product, right? So gross state domestic product, the GSDP of these particular states will be very, very high because they are getting income from abroad. Interestingly, the states which I have mentioned to you right now, they are having higher 60 plus age of population compared to the national average, and this could potentially affect the more of the population will be affected by COVID. This could be one of the factor for most of the population to be affected by COVID. So with respect to demography, how you can link COVID to demography? So many richer states like Maharashtra, like Kerala, like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, why are they being affected increasingly? This is the reason number one. Reason number one is because of excessive 60 plus population who are having comorbidities. Please take some running notes. Who are having comorbidities. What sort of comorbidities? High blood pressure, diabetes. So 60 plus population under these states are already well developed in terms of GSDP. Youth population have moved to some other locations. These 60 plus population are having comorbidities. That is the reason. That is also one of the reason why most of the COVID affecting states are like these states, your states of Kerala, Karnataka. Why immediately happened? It is because of the 60 plus age population. Number two, second point. The urban areas of Bombay, Bangalore, Chennai, Trivandrum, are excessively, you can add Delhi also, Delhi are excessively affected by COVID. The urban city centers are excessively affected by COVID because of the influx of migrating population, large workforce or large migrating workforce population who have inhabited these places, So because of the population pressure, most of the urban city centers have become the COVID hotspots. In contrast, third point, the low income states of Bihar and Jharkhand have a very low share of population, population in the 60 plus age, and that made them less vulnerable to pandemics. That made them very less vulnerable to pandemics. In fact, you can add one more point to it. The only exception with regard to the city centers, I mentioned Chennai, I've mentioned the Bangalore, Trivandrum, Delhi, Bombay, in fact, Kolkata also. The only exception to the city center ideology is Hyderabad. Hyderabad was not that affected. Telangana was not that affected. And Telangana was an exception when it comes to COVID statistics. In spite of a very highly populated city, in spite of a crowd puller. But in spite of it, the affected population is not that much in Hyderabad. We exactly do not know why COVID, I mean, it was affected, but not as much as what Bangalore or Chennai or Delhi had faced or Bombay had faced. So that's one sort of exception. As a case study, you can mention a couple of case study, put a very small heading, the points we will continue, but case study that was mentioned here, Dharavi. Dharavi, heard of Dharavi? I am sure that I have taught about Dharavi also. Slum settlement in Dharavi, we have heard of. Dharavi is it's a successful case of COVID eradication. Dharavi, put a small hyphen and write successful case of COVID eradication. In fact, this was appreciated by WHO, World Health Organization. So that's why we are learning about it. Dharavi is an example of case study. Dharavi is an example of successful management of COVID. Due to its geography, poor sewage facilities, due to its geography, poor sewage facilities and improper drainage systems, with around 80% of the population depending on community toilets. It was initially thought that Dharavi could become the most deadliest hotspot, with respect to COVID. However, with community participation, public-private partnership, with community participation, public-private partnership, the civil administration or the civic administration played an excellent role and combated and reduced or combated combated and combated COVID-19 in Dharavi. In fact, maintaining social distancing and proper sanitation practices is an extreme challenge with respect to Dharavi slum location. But by enforcing a strict lockdown, blocking the movements of residents, and using the mantra of within double quotes, test, trace, contain, and repeat. Test, trace, contain, and repeat. And using the mantra of test, trace, contain, and repeat, the government controlled the spread of the disease full stop. Local private doctors' involvement, NGOs, and community participation in the form of community kitchens. So they set up community kitchens. Like one person will come, he or she will make, a group of people will come and they will make food for the entire street of people. So there were community kitchens. So there was a lot of community participation. So what did I say? With the involvement of local doctors, NGOs, community participation in the form of community kitchen. These are some of the key features that helped to contain the spread of the virus. Okay, so this is something that was appreciated by who also appreciated the case with respect to Dharavi. All right, now continue the other points that what I was discussing before. Continue them. Two graphs we have to take it down. Two graphs. Mm. So first of all, write some points, then we will talk about the graph. Give the side heading as healthcare and fiscal implications. Healthcare and fiscal, not physical. It is fiscal. FISCAL. Fiscal implications. What is fiscal implications? Fiscal implications, healthcare and fiscal implications. In the parayumbo of states. Fiscal implications in certain states are very rich states. Like for example, Tamil Nadu is a rich state. Karnataka is a rich state. Jharkhand is not a rich state. So in that case, how the wealth of the states with respect to some states are very wealthy, but the states are they very poor. What was the how did this imbalance affected COVID? How did this imbalance between wealthy states and not so wealthy states, how did that affect COVID? That's what we're going to write right now. Fiscal healthcare and fiscal implications of states. The seventh schedule of the Indian Constitution, puts healthcare in the state list. Health is a part of your state list. Puts healthcare under state list. The center, however, has specific responsibilities in the management of disease outbreaks under, this is important, this point is very important. The center has specific responsibilities in the management of disease outbreaks under Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, underline Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, and the Disaster Management Act of 2005. However, in spite of the presence of many centrally sponsored schemes and the considerable contributions given by the center and the states, the expenditure of the households, the out-of-pocket expenditure, right? Like this is out-of-pocket expenditure. Out-of-pocket should be written like this. It's called as OOP. Out-of-pocket expenditure of people was considerably high. What does this point mean? States are spending something for the health of the people, center is spending something for the health of the people, but in spite of all of this out of pocket expenditure, the people because of COVID had to spend a lot of money out of their own pockets. This is called as out of pocket expenditure, which was very, very high. Here, take down some graph. As I'm drawing, just take down this graph. The heading of this graph is healthcare expenditure the heading of this graph is out of pocket healthcare and out of pocket expenditure. Healthcare and out of pocket expenditure, that is the heading of this particular graph. And look at what I am drawing here. This is a 4-quadrant graph. Do you know a 4-quadrant graph? First of all, a 4-quadrant graph, it will have 4 boxes like this. And there will be values that will be written on the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay, got an idea? So suppose, let's say here my 4-quadrant graph is like this. Here and in the y-axis, I'm going to write about out-of-pocket expenditure. And in the x-axis, I'm going to write states per capita expenditure. How much is the state spending per capita expenditure? How much is the state spending versus how much is the people, how much is the expenditure of the people? So that's what we are going to see in this particular graph. Have you understood this graph? Did you understand how this 4-quadrant graph is designed? Can I move to the actual graph? Is this graph clear? OOP in Parambo, people going to spend it? That's there in my y-axis. In the x-axis, how much is the states going to spend? Okay, see, yes, clear. Okay, fine. Now let's go back. So this is something that's important, and here it's going to be OOP, and here it is going to be states expenditure per capita, right? In this quadrant, so here it is 0, here it is 0, and here it keeps on expanding, like it's like in terms of rupees. This is in terms of percentage. OOP is in terms of percentage. State expenditure per capita per person, how much is going to be? So here it is given like 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, and the max is 10,000. All right, and here it's like going from 40, 45, 50, 55, like that. All right, and 60, 65, till up to 80. Okay, so this is how the graph goes. Now look at some states alone we will mention in this graph. The important states alone, let me mention. First of all, let's talk about Kerala, since we all know about Kerala. Kerala, let's keep this as the first quadrant, this is the second quadrant, this one is the third quadrant, and this is the fourth quadrant. Now tell me something. What is the meaning if a particular state falls under the third quadrant? It means that, now follow me clearly, this is not something that's given in your syllabus, but I assume that it might be important for your GS paper, mains, and as well as your optional paper. This is not something that's given as such in your syllabus. Epidemic word. Now since we are having a pandemic, I thought this might be very, very important. So I think there can be a question in paper 1 of your geography, that's GS paper 1, or with respect to your option. All right, now paper quadrant 3, suppose let's say that there is a state. What does that mean? It means that the state is also spending so much for the health of a people, that particular, I'm sorry, if some quadrant, if a particular state is in second quadrant, then that means the state is also spending too much for that particular people, that people are also spending so much for that particular in that particular state. Out of pocket expenditure when I'm talking about my state expenditure, that's also pretty high. Kerala falls under second quadrant, and that is a problem with respect to this particular state. Why do I call that as a problem? Because when the state is already spending so much, if the people are also spending so much, then that means government hospitals is equally good, and there is also like three cash and there is a lot of money with the people, and that's why they are investing or they are spending so much in terms of private hospitals. If a state is in quadrant number 2, then that means the state is also spending so much money with respect to the health of the people. The people themselves are also spending so much money, and that indicates private hospitals is actually extracting a lot of money. This, I would say, is good. There is a lot of health consciousness with respect to people, but it's also bad in terms of growth of private hospitals and in terms of growth of out of pocket expenditure from the terms of people. Why are people spending so much when already the government hospitals go so good? Why are people spending so much? So that's way, maybe because of too much of literacy, people think it's good to spend for health so much. ഇനി അതൊരു ഒരു ഒരു പക്ഷെ അത് പ്രൈവറ്റ് ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽസിന്റെ ഒരു വളർച്ചയായി കൂടി കാണാൻ പറ്റും. Or we can say that it is because of too much money that the private hospitals are exploiting from the people. Getting my point? That is with respect to Kerala. The very, what you call the so-called high GDP states, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, all of them falls in the second quadrant. Then comes another case, Gujarat. Gujarat is in the fourth quadrant. Now, are you able to relate this here, which indicates statum spend cheynilla, people spend cheynilla? What does that mean? That means that enough focus with respect to health is not given by the concerned state government. So what is the best quadrant now? Now, can you give me an answer? Which quadrant will be the best one in terms of the explanation that I've given so far? Can you tell me one on a second one on a third on a fourth on a, which one is the best in terms of in from your understanding of this graph? I'm asking which one is the best quadrant. Everybody, can you give me some specific answers? Okay, so that I know that you have understood this thing perfectly, because if not, then I would have to explain a bit more. So Korea answers, one answer is saying one are better, and someone else told three is better. Now that's correct. It's more or less three is the best one. Why? Now let me first of all tell you why. Good. So those who have said three, that's a very nice understanding. Now, why is one bad? See, out of pocket expenditure koodi kazhiyumbo, if I'm talking about one, out of pocket expenditure is so high. Why should people spend so much money in terms of health? Why can't the government do it? In all of the schemes which the government has designed, out of pocket expenditure കുറയ്ക്കണം എന്നാണ് അവരുടെ പ്രധാനമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു aim. With respect to many schemes, we'll be discussing some schemes also here. Reducing out of pocket expenditure is one of the very important character with regard to governmental schemes. Third quadrant analyze ചെയ്ത് നോക്കുമ്പോൾ government expenditure with respect to health is high. The expenditure with respect to the out of pocket expenditure is also pretty much low. And here I have states like, in the third quadrant, I have very important states like Karnataka, Himachal Pradesh. So I have Karnataka, I have Himachal Pradesh, and I also have Maharashtra and Haryana. These are, I would say, the best states to live, because out of pocket expenditure is pretty low, but you are spending, the state is spending so much in terms of medical expenditure, which is actually good. state in the expenditure for countries like Singapore, the health is actually free of cost. So it's like a country or a state which spends so much in terms of education and health. That's a good country. Similarly, the states which fall under the third quadrant is pretty good state. Now look at what the worst quadrant for a state to be in is actually, I would say, the first quadrant. First quadrant is the worst quadrant to be in, because if it out of pocket expenditure ഒത്തിരി കൂടുതലുണ്ട്, പിന്നെ നമ്മുടെ സ്റ്റേറ്റിന്റെ എക്സ്പെൻഡിച്ചർ വളരെ കുറവാണ്. So that's actually pretty bad, and there you have many states. For example, I have Bihar, I have UP, I have Madhya Pradesh, I have Jharkhand. All right. All right. So roughly these important states alone. So if you analyze these states, all of them are very poor states. If you analyze these states are educationally also they are pretty good, economically also they are pretty good. If you analyze these states, educationally they are pretty good, economically they are pretty good, but what is lacking? What is lacking? It's not lacking, but people are very well educated, people are of high standards, that they are very well-to-do people are, so they spend money out of themselves. Like let's say that a government doctor says there is no disease with you, the person would still approach a private doctor, would spend so much money in terms of scan reports, that this MRI scan, that scan, this scan, and finally would conclude, okay, I'm disease free. What is the satisfaction? Only if you go to a private hospital, I am getting mentally satisfied. This kind of mental criteria is also there. So this is the rough healthcare expenditure in terms of different states as given by RBI. Have you taken down this graph? Please take it down. I will give you 2 minutes. If you have already taken down, then please put a yes so that I can move forward. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay, fine. We'll move ahead. Take down the next point with respect to this fiscal expenditure of the states. Take down some couple of points. States in quadrant one, states in quadrant one performed or performs poorly on state healthcare expenditure, and there is high out of pocket expenditure, suggesting that people belonging to these states might have to spend so much during the COVID pandemic season. How are we relating? We are relating the healthcare expenditure to the geographical aspects of our topic. Are you understanding this link? We are linking the from geography എങ്ങനെയാണോ COVID ഒരു relation കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ പറ്റും, that's what we are doing. So from states in quadrant number 1 indicate perform poorly on healthcare spending. There is excessive out of pocket expenditure, suggesting that the people in these states might have to spend excessively because of COVID. On the other hand, states in quadrant number 3 are the best performing ones on both the aspects of state expenditure and out of pocket expenditure, on both aspects of state expenditure and out of pocket expenditure, highlighting the key role played by governmental finance, highlighting the key role played by governmental finance in the health care of these states. Thus, significant interstate disparities, thus significant interstate disparities exist in access and affordability of healthcare, in access and affordability of healthcare. Full stop. Southern states have significantly better coverage of medical doctors, while the coverage in low income states of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, all those states which I have mentioned in quadrant number 1, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, is among the lowest in the country. What is the lowest in the country? Doctor people ratio, the coverage of medical doctors. It is lowest in the country. These states also have very poor number of registered nurses and midwives. And midwives with respect to the total population size. Next point, though funding from centrally sponsored health schemes, like National Health Mission, RSBY, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, PMJAY, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, has played a key role in correcting the imbalances in healthcare spending, across the states. Full stop. However, it has not been enough to compensate. For the inherent fiscal disparities in the poorer states. Okay, give the next side heading as reverse migration and COVID pandemic. Another phenomenon which we witnessed, reverse migration. Okay, this heading is reverse migration. I'm sure you might have heard of this term in newspapers. Reverse migration and COVID pandemic. Now, one thing which we observed during COVID pandemic is reverse migration. What is reverse migration? Migration of the people towards the city centers in search of employment is the onward migration. It's called as the onward migration. Migration from rural areas to urban areas in search of some employment opportunities is onward migration. Reverse migration of Arembo, from the city centers, people started moving towards their native places. Yes, we saw lots of people. They were moving on the top of the trains, top of the buses, from Chennai to the native places, from Bombay to various places. All of this happened. This is called as reverse migration. something started to occur with regard to COVID pandemic. The first time we are witnessing reverse migration is always there, but this large scale reverse migration. Now, I made a statement here. Reverse migration is always present. Why did I make such a statement? Understand something here. Something very, very important point you have to understand. Reverse migration is always there in Paran. That's primarily because um, some people, let's take for example, 50 plus age person. He would have migrated from maybe some interior portion of Tamil Nadu to Chennai in search of job. For 30, 20, age, he might have migrated to Chennai. Now he is almost nearing his retirement age. He might take a VRS and he might come to his native place. This is a reverse migration. Why? He wants to experience that native village style of living. So this is reverse migration. A lot of people did reverse migration during pandemic. So what's the reason behind it? So the first point, take down the first point. The nationwide lockdown imposed job losses, prompting migrant laborers to return from cities to the native places. First, what is the reason? The nationwide lockdown prompted the migrant laborers to return from cities to native places. In the reverse migration, because of push factors, underlying push factors, because of push factors like high cost of living in the urban areas, loss of high cost of living in the urban areas, loss of employment, no earnings, uncertainty about the lifting of lockdown, March 20, somewhere around that point of time, in the 2020 time period, first lockdown was imposed. We were not sure when this lockdown, what is meant by lockdown? When will we be asked to move from this place? There was a lot of questions. So the uncertainty about the lifting of the lockdown, limited access to social and unemployment benefits. These are all push factors. What do you mean by push factors? Factors which push a person away from his city region to move towards a native region. These push factors. Pull factors, we'll be writing about pull factors, but write down. Push factors, these are some of the push factors. Access to social and unemployment benefits made the person to move away from the city regions towards the native village regions. This along with pull factors, like agricultural harvesting, Narega scheme in rural areas, joining with their relatives in the native places, joining with their families in the native places, and the notion of feeling more safe in their native places, made a lot of people to shift towards their native regions. What are the pull factors? What are the push factors? You need to understand very, very specifically in terms of reverse migration. This is also a part of reverse migration. When I was dealing about migration theories, I mentioned about reverse migration. So the reverse migration is a very important thing that you have to write about when you are writing about geography paper with respect to COVID. All right. Right. Then the next point is, though the character of remote working within bracket work from home, though the character of remote working within bracket work from home was seen in IT sector jobs, majority of the workforce who work in construction based who work in construction sector and manufacturing sector, construction sector and manufacturing sector were 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 jobless for most of the time. This also led to permanent loss of jobs for many women workforce. This also led to permanent job loss for many women workforce. Major reverse migration corridors of India, put a small hyphen and write. Major reverse migration corridors of India, put a small hyphen. The first thing is, we are writing about reverse migration corridors. Number one, Gujarat to Uttar Pradesh. This was the major movement. Gujarat, they moved to Uttar Pradesh. The next one is Maharashtra to Uttar Pradesh. Third one is Tamil Nadu to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Fourth one is Rajasthan to Bihar and UP. These are the 4 major reverse migration corridors which happened in India. So how will you write this geographically? You have to draw a map and you have to mention the state of Gujarat, how people are moving towards UP. You have to mention the state of Maharashtra, how they are moving on to UP. Draw, instead of writing this, draw it in a map. Major reverse migration corridors, instead of writing these 4 passages, 4 things, you can draw it in a map. Now, before we go in any further on this particular document, I need to ask you something. Is this reverse migration push and pull factors clear to everybody? We are right now in the mid of this 50 page, even 25 pages are another. We still have 25 pages to go. Yes, perfect. So let's take this. Let's go to the next set of things. Yes. The next side heading that you have to give is MSMEs, middle, small, and medium enterprises, how they got affected by COVID. MSMEs and COVID. This sector was heavily affected by COVID because of 3 reasons. Number 1, supply side disruptions. What do you mean by supply side disruption? First of all, write it. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Supply side disruptions, domestic demand shock, and third one is external demand decline. Supply side disruptions, domestic demand shock, and external demand decline. Now, what is supply side disruption? Suppose let's say that this bottle has been manufactured by an MSME sector. E bottle manufacture steel is needed. We need steel. So what is supply side disruption? When this industry does not get the steel, that's a raw material for that industry. That's what we call it as supply side disruption. Then we have demand side shock. People need to have money in order to buy this bottle. What if they do not, if they think that this bottle is a luxury, I don't want it right now, demand side shocks will happen. External demand decline. Exports are also not happening because most of the countries blocked the import export of items. So export also stopped. So that's why three-sided attack was felt by MSME sector. Three-sided attack. Okay, so what is it? Supply side disruption, domestic demand declined, and then external shocks, external demand decline. Okay, and those are the three things. MSMEs also employ, next point, MSMEs also employ a large share of informal laborers, and consequently, because of lockdown, reverse migration, and uh, because of lockdown and reverse migration, MSMEs sectors got shut down and a lot of people faced job losses. To withstand the economic disruption, government launched the scheme of Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? Local, what is it? Atma Nirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Okay. Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So a lot of package program for MSME sectors was unleashed or was released using Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So special measures were announced under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan to revive the MSME sectors. Okay, so the problems with regard to MSMEs and what was the governmental step with regard to MSME that we have written. Right, next one, next heading, you give it as digitalization, banking and COVID. Digitalization, banking and COVID. So as you all know, what is digitalization, digital economy that we were talking about? Like one sector which faced a huge or which was very helpful to the people and which experienced a lot of growth is digital sector. So I mean by digital sector, I mean digital economy, banking, UPI payments. Everybody, we started using what? Google Pay, Phone Pay. In fact, from my own experience, my father, who has never seen or who's very used to the conventional cash-based transactions, he started to use Phone Pay and Google Pay. Very now he uses Google Pay and Phone Pay. My father is a 60+ person. He does not use much of these kinds of the updated technology. Post COVID, some things that he started using was Phone Pay, Google Pay, and then he started using a lot of this internet banking. Digitalization, which was very uncommon with regard to tier 2, tier 3 city people. Tier 2, tier 3 city people, not city, town people, tier 2 town people, tier 3 town people, especially the old age population who's very used to conventional cash based transfers. They started using or adopting digitalized economy. So that's what we are going to write here. Digital transactions offered immense scope for provisions of provisions and delivery of goods and services during the pandemics. Direct benefit transfer system, DBT, direct benefit transfer system, was used to a large scale to transfer subsidies directly to Aadhaar linked bank accounts. Point number 1, DBT transfer directly to Aadhaar linked bank accounts. Point number 1. Digitalization, number 2, digitalization increased transparency, better identification and targeting of people, reduced leakages, and more faster and safer transaction of funds became possible. Next point, from geography perspective, we need to write some points. Haryana tops this list with respect to digital economy. Haryana tops this list with respect to digital economy, whereas more populous states, more populated states, more populous states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh lags in terms of digital banking services. In terms of retail digital transactions, the amount of UPI based payments, saw a rise of 57.3% during the pandemic times. Next side heading, COVID and the role of local governments. COVID and the role of PRIs, Panchayati Raj institutions or local governments. In times of pandemics like COVID, strong and empowered local bodies played an effective role in terms of containment measures, spreading awareness, and they adopted innovative approaches like setting up of disinfection tunnels in public centers. Have you heard of disinfection tunnels? Disinfection tunnels is like I do not know if it was there in Kerala, but in many public center enterprises, PSUs, like in BHEL, there was a tunnel set up like that. There was a tunnel that was set up. There will be sprays in different parts of this tunnel. A person has to enter the tunnel, his entire body will be sprayed with disinfectant. Have you seen this kind of disinfection tunnels? So in many crowded places, like in Chennai, many crowded places had this sort of disinfection tunnels. Okay, so you understood this concept. So many local bodies had set up innovative approach like the setting up of disinfection tunnels, use of drones for monitoring movement of people, etc. The most noted or case study, the most noted role of local government was seen in the state of Kerala. Excellent involvement of local bodies on what was done in Kerala, because we had this zonation, right? We had the zonation, zone A, B, C, like that. And there we had, how did we divide the states? I mean, A category, B category, how was the, it was essentially local body based characterization. Like we divided it into A, B, C based on that panchayat, how much people have been affected. So it was very localized monitoring was done and localized containment was done. So the most successful model of containment and the most successful model of involvement of the local self-government, local PRIs was done in the state of Kerala. The Kerala model of containment, the Kerala model of containment witnessed involvement of a lot of empowered local governance institutions, a lot of empowered local governance institutions and community participation, full stop. It was the first state to be affected in India. However, the state successfully managed to contain the spread of the pandemic in the first wave. It successfully managed to contain the spread of the pandemic in the first wave. This was done by with the help of this was done with the help of local self-governments by bringing healthcare workers, Kudumbashri members. I'm sure you've heard of Kudumbashri schemes. So Kudumbashri members, local healthcare workers, Kudumbashri members, Anganwadi staff, local authorities, and by the involvement of the state police. Okay, so that is a small case study with respect to Kerala model of containment. More or less, that's it. Yes, more or less that's about it. That's about this particular 100-page, 50-page document. Right now, any doubts in any of the things that we have discussed so far? We are moving to something else. Any doubts here? Can we move ahead? Clear, Anna? Okay. So now, one thing before going ahead, one thing I would like to mention, this write-up that we have dictated so far, that you have written down so far, try to make use of these case studies that we have discussed, and please do not lose your written notes more than your printed notes. I value whatever that we have dictated in the class. If at all that's there with you, please do not lose it. It will be very, very helpful for you, right? And try to use this kind of a case study, whatever we have discussed here and there, try to use it as much as possible in your other GS papers also. I'm talking about mains, in your GS papers also, right? This next topic that we are going to discuss is problems of agrarian unrest. So there is a topic, this is the last topic with regard to this chapter, problems of agrarian unrest and industrial unrest. So what is the basic problem? First of all, we are going to discuss about agrarian unrest. So what is the basic problem with regard to agrarian unrest? The first thing is farmer suicides that you have heard of. Farmer suicides is one thing. There is a lot in terms of debt of the farmers. Too much coming of your foreign corporates carry varunanda, and these small farmers are not able to compete with the corporates. the commercialization of agriculture is also another problem with regard to the farmers. All right. So all these factors, multiple factors like this. Then you can discuss about how farming as a practice is not very much commercially viable. If you say that I am a farmer, it means that you are very poor. Okay, so commercial viability of this industry is also very, very poor. Because of all these reasons, there is a lot of migration of the farmers towards the urban city centers. Idinakka vachittu farming is not very commercially viable. Commercial corporate entities are coming into farming. Farmers are having a lot of debt issues. Farm suicides are happening. Pinna, what is there? Farm crop loss is happening. Climate change is happening. Because of that, crop loss is happening. Loss of crops. The risks with respect to agriculture is very, very high because of climate change. Because of these reasons that I have listed down right now, agrarian unrest is happening. Farmers go on strike. Farmers commit suicide. Agrarian unrest is happening. And this has not, agrarian unrest is not a very recent phenomena. It has been there from the British times itself. Heard of many movements. Your Indigo Rebellion is a form of agrarian unrest. Santal Rebellion is a form of agrarian unrest. Many peasant movements you have heard of, many peasant movements in history. All of them you can cite that as whatever that you have read in Indian history, in modern history, under this heading of peasant rebellions. All of that, and I'm not joking, all of that you can, if the question comes from peasant rebellions, divide it into two categories. One is pre-independence movement, pre-independent peasant rebellions, post-independent peasant rebellions. With regard to pre-independence, you can give whatever that you have read in modern Indian history with regard to pre-independent peasant rebellions, you can quote this there. Post-independence angle, the very recent farmer rebellions that happened because of the 3 farm laws, that you can quote in terms of post-independent farm rebellions, farm agrarian unrest. What you should be writing for post-independent movement? Farm rebellions, farm peasant movements that happened against the 3 farm laws, against the institution of the 3 farm laws, can be quoted as one of the post-independent movement. Okay, so causes of agrarian unrest. First thing, causes of agrarian unrest. So again, please take note of this. This is pretty much important. Pre-independent movement, you have to take examples from your modern Indian history. Post-independence, you have to take the example of the recent farm rebellion which happened against the 3 farm laws, right? Causes of agrarian unrest. Some causes that I have discussed so far. First thing is increased burden of debt. Second thing is commercialization of agriculture. The entry of cooperatives, not cooperatives, corporates. Entry of corporates, MNCs, multinational companies into agriculture. Pepsi, have you heard of Pepsi? Pepsi is also a part of your, Pepsi has got lots of farms with respect to Punjab areas in terms of agriculture. Lay's, potato chips, Lay's, that Lay's is a brand of Pepsi. And all those potatoes which they use for Lay's, that comes from corporate farming. Pepsi is an excellent example of corporate in farming, in agriculture. Now, what's the problem with this? The thing is, a small farmer cannot compete with a corporate like Pepsi. Okay, so corporate involvement in commercial farming activities have destroyed small farmers. Then farm debts, lack of banking subsidies, lack of banking infrastructure and banking loans to small and marginal farmers. Lack of banking loans that is given to small and marginal farmers. All the gold loans that you get, that's directly being going for rich farmers. Small and marginal farmers are affected. Next point is destruction of cottage industries of farmers. Destruction of cottage industries of farmers. Migration of traditional farming communities to urban centers in search of new jobs. Migration of traditional farming communities to urban centers in search of jobs. Next point is loss faced in agriculture because of climate change. Agricultural risks are increasing because of climate change. The next point is excessive labor in terms of rural population. Excessive labor are, they get too much of labor. And what will these too many laborers will do? Ipo namakku ottri machines vannittund. Also, the agriculture is not a remunerative field. Agriculture is not a very remunerative field. Naturally, the youth will move towards the urban city centers. So increased population, increased rural population leads to a lot of out migration towards the urban centers. Agriculture has become more like a seasonal employment. If there is a lack of job in the cities, people will come to agriculture. Only during some times of that's one case. Second case, only during some times in agriculture, maybe in the Kharif season, maybe in the Rabi season, they will grow crops. The rest of the season, they will go to the urban city centers. This kind of seasonal character of agriculture, that is also very much detrimental for the farmers. Seasonal, or you can write in other words, it leads to, agriculture leads to seasonal unemployment. Agriculture leads to seasonal unemployment. Small size of land holdings, fragmented land holdings, these are other important reasons for agrarian unrest. Okay, so the governmental schemes that was brought by government in terms of removing the agrarian unrest, the first scheme is number one. Start from the old schemes to the new ones. The first one is integrated rural development programs and Jawahar Rojgar Yojana, JRY, Jawahar. All Rojgar Yojana is like all wherever Rose is actually employment based schemes. So Jawahar Rojgar Yojana and IRDP tried to improve employment for the village farmers, for the agrarian rural laborers. Jawahar Rojgar Yojana and IRDP tried to improve employment opportunities for the agrarian laborers, rural laborers. Number two, have you heard of the scheme called doubling farmers' income by 2022? Doubling farmers' income. So that was another scheme. Modi ji promised every farmer of India that by 20 doubling farmers by 2022, all your income will be doubled. All the farmers' income will be doubled. Very recently, countless number of articles, Hindu and Indian Express, many articles came up because 2022, we are in 2022. So there was many, this can be a probable question also. There were many articles telling that has the farmers' income has actually been. So this was started somewhere in 2016 or somewhere like that. 5-year scheme another. So doubling the farmers' income by 2022. Has the farmers' income actually been doubled? Many articles raised a question, but actually no, the farmers' income has not been doubled. So this was one scheme that was raised by no, you're not supposed to write it that it was not doubled. Maybe if the question is a critically analyzed question, maybe you can write some negative points, but otherwise don't write. So this was another scheme that was given by the government, doubling farmers' income by the year of 2022. The goal is to promote welfare of the farmers and reduce the agrarian distress by doubling the farmers' income by 2022. The committee is Ashok Dalwai Committee. Ashok Dalwai Committee. Ashok Dalwai Committee recommendation on doubling farmers' income. Other schemes, you might have heard of some schemes when I was discussing about agriculture. Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Fasal Bima Yojana. So this is basically my weather-based crop insurance scheme. Fasal Bima Yojana is weather-based crop insurance scheme. Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, comma, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Krishi Sinchai Yojana. What is Krishi Sinchai Yojana? We read about more crop per drop, har khet ko pani, every field should get water. So Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana are some of the schemes within bracket. Fasal Bima Yojana is weather-based crop insurance scheme. Krishi Sinchai Yojana is watershed management programs, more crop per drop irrigation development schemes. These are some of the schemes developed to remove climate changes, to weather, to remove climate change based agrarian distress, and water management programs, and some of the water management, and they are some of the water management programs. You can write it in your own words, but this is what it means. The next thing is ENAM, Electronic National Agricultural Markets. ENAM is proposed to be is set up. ENAM is set up under the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee schemes Act. Under APMC Act, ENAM was set up, Electronic National Agricultural Market, neem coated urea and fertilizer subsidy. These are some of the schemes of the government. Please try to expand it in your own words. What is neem coated urea? I've explained about neem coated urea. Yes or no? That's important for your prelims also.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that's very important for your prelims, and I've explained it. Neem coated urea, fertilizer subsidy also I've explained with regard to NPK subsidies. What are the decontrolled fertilizers? What is the controlled fertilizers? We have explained. So these are some of the schemes. You have to write it down. I can again explain to you. You can write it using your own words. ENAM scheme, neem coated urea, fertilizer subsidy. One case study alone, you take it up. Case studies are very, very important for your optionals. Case study, Raitu Bandhu scheme of Telangana. Raitu Bandhu scheme of Telangana. Case study. So I give the heading as case study and then write this Raitu Bandhu scheme. Put this within a box. Just a second. So basically, though I do not have the notes of Raitu Bandhu scheme, maybe you can refer it on your own, but this is actually a farm support scheme. A farm support scheme um, like where you are given somewhere almost around 5,000 per acre. Please refer this on your own. I'm not very sure. Rupees 5,000 per acre of land owned by farmers, owned by farmers, so that they can use per year, so that they can use this amount for any, as a form of extra subsidy. You can call this as farm support scheme. Farmer or farm support scheme. So this is one way by which government is actually trying to promote the farmers to undertake more and more agriculture in their fields. Okay, so Raitu Bandhu scheme. Okay, this was a scheme that was undertaken by Telangana, though I don't have notes of it. You try to refer whether this data is correct or not, and try to take some couple of points here. Let me tell you the negatives with regard to Raitu Bandhu scheme. The first thing is, it does not take into account landless farmers or tenant farmers. Landless farmers or tenant farmers. Not everybody owns like 2-3 acres of land. There will be landless farmers also, right? So these landless farmers, what will they do? Suppose they try to cultivate a land of somebody else. What will they are also very poor. They should also be given money. But no, this scheme does not take into account tenant farmers. But this is a very good scheme, but it does not take into account landless farmers or tenant farmers. So that is one major disadvantage with regard to Raitu Bandhu scheme. But otherwise, it's very, very good. Right. Now, what about the problems of industrial unrest? Now we are going to the other one, industrial unrest, problems of industrial unrest. Industrial unrest, when the industrial laborers are not happy with the way the industries are functioning. So they will, and the best example of industrial unrest happened in the communist states are now 3 industrial unrest സംഭവിക്കുന്നത്. Why? Because industrial unions are very strong here. Trade unions are very strong here. So what will happen is, even if you slightly touch one worker, the unions are very, very strong, and they will rise against the corporates. So the industrial unrest is something that we can face with respect to minimum wages, with respect to safety, atmosphere of working. Adu safe ano ado adine vechittu lots of industrial unrest have happened. So take down some causes of industrial unrest. The causes of industrial unrest. Number 1, cyclical unemployment. Faced by industries. Cyclical unemployment faced by industries because of trade fluctuations in industries. Cyclical unemployment happens because of trade fluctuations in the industries. There is one more unemployment called as frictional unemployment. Take down that as the second point. Number 2, frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment, maybe put a hyphen and write, happens because of changes in technologies, because of technological changes. The skill set of an employee will not match with the skill set that is demanded by the employer. I repeat, skill set of the employee will not match with the skills demanded by the employer. I'm sure you might have heard of different types of unemployment in your economic classes. Frictional unemployment. Suppose, let's say that I, as an employer, need a person who is well versed with artificial intelligence. How many of your normal people know about artificial intelligence? In fact, I don't know. So in that case, nobody knows. Not, it's a very tough subject, artificial intelligence. Very rare people know about data science. artificial intelligence, and so on. So this kind of frictional unemployment happens when there is a mismatch between the demands of the employer and the skills possessed by the employee. So that can also happen. Mismatch between your skill sets of the employee and the demands of the employer. Number two. Number three, large scale migration of rural people towards urban city centers. Large scale migration that happens. Now what will happen because of this? Think about it. When there is a large scale migration, from rural to urban areas, naturally there will be pressure on the rural people when they move towards the urban centers. Naturally, urban people feel that our jobs, our resources, our education, these are shared by some other people. There will be pressure on land. There will be pressure on employment opportunities. There will be competition for natural resources. Everything will occur. Take this down: competition of natural resources, competition of education in institutions, competition in terms of hospitals, population pressure, pollution will rise. All crimes will increase. Next point, industrial unrest happens also because of a lack of social security measures given by the industrialists. Social security, nobody is to give me PF, if nobody is going to give me daily allowance, DA, TA, no employee will work there. PF is demanded by the industry, by the employees. If the industry owner, if the employer is not giving me PF, naturally there will be industrial unrest. So lack of welfare and social security measures, if that is not there, there will be a lot of unrest. Next one, rising wages demanded by the employers. So this is always a problem between the employer and the employee, wage issues. Next point, random hire and fire policy followed by the industrialist. What is hire and fire? There is no hire and fire policy, random hire and fire policy followed by the industrialist. Usually this will happen in case of contractual employers. In the contract only they would have mentioned that for any reason your contract can be terminated. Now that's a very random issue that can happen. They can hire you at any cost, they can fire you at any cost. So hire and fire is a policy of the industrialist that's very bad at present. Right, there is next one. Loss faced by industries are very high. Many policies, because of the very high losses faced by the industries, naturally they will tend to fire many of their own laborers. All of these are reasons for industrial unrest to happen. The next point is role of technology in industrial unrest. What is happening? Automation is happening. Mechanization. These are leading to loss of demand for manual laborers. Mechanization, automation leads to drop of requirement of manual laborers. So what happens because of that? Naturally, there will be a lot of job losses will occur, right? മെക്കനൈസേഷൻ ഒത്തിരി കാണുമ്പോൾ, ഓട്ടോമേഷൻ ഒത്തിരി കാണുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് പീപ്പിളിന്റെ ആവശ്യം അവിടെ കാണത്തില്ല. സോ നാച്ചുറലി ദർ വിൽ ബി a lot of job losses. So these are some things that we are increasingly facing as a result of industrial unrest. One thing I want you to take down here, a case study, Maruti Suzuki, Manesar plant. Heard of Manesar Maruti Suzuki? Manesar in Haryana, Manesar plant of Maruti Suzuki faced a serious labor crisis, a labor problem of unrest, faced a serious labor problem of unrest in July 2012, where almost 147 workers, 147 workers were fired because of political reasons, because of political reasons, and because of certain internal reasons, right? Not political, because of certain internal reasons, and this is a classic example of industrial unrest. A lot of protest happened after that, and this is a classic example of present day industrial unrest. All right, so that is it with regard to your industrial unrest and agrarian unrest. One thing that I want to tell to you, just give me a minute. I am telling this with the hope that maybe, if not now, maybe later during your strong mains preparation, at least you will go through these notes, and maybe you will use these notes in the I wish and pray that you should not be repeating, but if at all you are repeating and if you go through the notes, I think this would be helpful. And that's the reason why I'm giving you lots of case studies with the hope that you would look at it in some point of time in your future, right? So in that aspect, one small thing, you write it down. Maybe if not now, maybe in the future, at least you will take this down. You'll take note of this. Recently, there have been 4 labor codes that have been released by the government. Okay, these labor reforms code is important. GS paper 1, it's important, not GS paper 1. Paper 3, it is important from the perspective of optionals also, it's pretty important, right? So, and from the perspective of prelims, it's even more important. What I want you to do is have the small heading case study, labor reforms. Have the heading as labor reforms, labor codes, and take this down. In 2019, the central government introduced 4 bills on labor codes to consolidate 29 central labor laws. So what was happening is there were like more than 40 central laws and like somewhere about 100 state laws were there. Now after this kind of 4 bills, for 4 labor codes, after that, you know what happened? All those 40 central labor laws, it has been consolidated into just 4 bills. So it's like a major improvement and major reform that happened with labor laws. So from the perspective of industrial unrest, these 4 labor reform codes, or the 4 labor codes, becomes very, very important. So take down to consolidate some 29 central laws. These are number one, code on wages. Number one, code on wages. Number two, industrial relations code. Number three, social security code. Number four, occupational safety, health and working conditions code. Occupational safety, health and working conditions code. Okay. I am not describing in detail about labor code because that is not a part of geography. പക്ഷെ അതൊരു കേസ് സ്റ്റഡി ആയിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അതിനെ യൂസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. So maybe as a case study, you can read more on this and you can formulate some points. This is important in the corner of your textbook. Again, I'm stressing this is important for prelims. Maybe you can go ahead. I cannot send it in group, but this is something that is found in Byju's IAS. I do not know if I can send it in group or not, but I can tell you this. This is something that's available in Byju's IAS as a form of PDF. You can download it and you can save it up. This is important for your prelims. This is important for your GS paper 3. The heading is labor reforms, labor codes. What you can do is you can download this and read more on it. In fact, I can tell you something. There is something called as gig workers, right? Gig workers, your Swiggy, Amazon, Flipkart, these people, the delivery people, they're called as gig workers, right? Have you heard of this term called gig workers? Now, gig workers now are defined. For the first time, the government has tried to define what is called as gig workers. So from that perspective, you can read more on it. I'm just telling you from the perspective of prelims. I'm winding up my class for today. I'm telling from the perspective of prelims. That's quite important. All right. The rest of it, the next chapter, that is your political aspects, we will take it up in the next class. All right. Any doubts? We can wind up the class. I do not want to take more time of your prelims preparation. Now, one more small thing. I intend to complete chapter number 9 within tomorrow. I do not know how, but I do not want to burden you as far as possible, because now look at this political aspects. Political aspects. I have 2-3 things. Follow me. Geographical basis of Indian federalism and state reorganization. This is nothing but your what you are seeing in that polity chapter, no? Like how each of the states got divided. That's exactly that. Emergence of new states, I have to describe on that. How new states are, how there are new states which is trying to form, and those things I would have to describe. But geopolitics of South Asia, India's role in world affairs, what is India doing with regard to Ukraine crisis and all of that, that's more like international affairs. Cross-border terrorism is more related to internal security. So there will be not much from my side with respect to these things. All right. Some things here and there I will touch for you. All right. So that is it. Anything that you need to ask me, please be frank and ask me. Anything that bothers you? Any doubts on these things that we have discussed so far? Prepare well for your tomorrow's exam. Medieval India, I think it is medieval. Right. All the best. We will wind up the class if there is nothing else.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am.
Yeah. Bye.